Good evening. Welcome to Loveworld USA News. I'm Barbara Sam. First, a quick look at the top stories this evening. China signals willingness to negotiate tariffs with U.S., warns against coercion. U.S. denies reports of Iran nuclear talks in Rome, but says future negotiations likely. Rubio reveals Biden-era State Department office kept disinformation files on a Trump official. Minneapolis police arrest suspect in mass shooting that left 4 dead. President Trump's 2026 budget proposal slashes domestic spending, ramps up national security and tariffs. And now to the news. China's Commerce Ministry has said it is evaluating a U.S. offer to hold tariff negotiations, signaling a potential opening for de-escalation amid a high-stakes trade conflict between the world's 2 largest economies. The announcement follows President Donald Trump's imposition of sweeping global tariffs last month, including a 145% tariff on Chinese imports, which Beijing countered with a 125% tariff on American goods. The U.S. has recently taken the initiative on many occasions to convey information to China, the ministry said in a statement. While acknowledging Beijing's openness to talks, the ministry warned that attempting to use talks as a pretext to engage in coercion and extortion would not work. The comment appears to caution Washington against leveraging trade negotiations for political or economic pressure. Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett confirmed on Thursday that U.S. officials have been actively seeking dialogue with China. And, quote, "I am confident that the Chinese will want to reach a deal," end quote, Bassett said, characterizing the process as multi-phased. First, we need to de-escalate, and then over time, we will start focusing on a larger trade deal. His remarks come as Beijing begins easing some tariffs, adding new exemptions for U.S. trade products such as ethane. Despite recent overtures, tensions remain high. Just last week, China's UN ambassador accused the U.S. of using tariffs to advance hegemonic ambitions, promoting sharp criticism from the State Department. Still, the current shift in tone from China's Commerce Ministry may indicate a strategic recalibration as both sides weigh the broader impact of trade disruptions on their domestic economies and global markets. Watch this.
Beijing is evaluating an offer from Washington to hold talks over US President Donald Trump's 145% tariffs. That was the message from China's Commerce Ministry Friday, although it warned the US not to engage in, quote, extortion and coercion. Washington and Beijing have been locked in a back and forth over tariffs. Both sides are unwilling to be seen to back down in a trade war that has hit global markets and supply chains. The Commerce Ministry said the US has approached China to seek talks over Trump's tariffs. It added Beijing was open to discussions and signaled a potential de-escalation in the trade war. It comes a week after Trump claimed discussions were already underway, which Beijing denied. China said the US should be prepared to take action in what it called correcting erroneous practices and cancel unilateral tariffs. It further said Washington needed to show sincerity in negotiations. US tariffs on many Chinese products saw Beijing respond in April with levies on imports of US goods of 125%. Beijing also called Trump's tariff strategy a joke. Analysts believe the back-and-forth increases could make goods trade between the world's 2 largest economies impossible. They say import duties beyond about 35% could potentially wipe out Chinese exporters' profit margins and make American products in China similarly expensive.
The U.S. State Department has denied reports that a fourth round of nuclear talks with Iran was scheduled to take place this weekend in Rome, stating that no such meeting was ever officially confirmed. The United States was never confirmed to be participating in a fourth round of talks with Iran, said State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce. The confusion arose after Iranian and Omanian officials indicated that discussions might resume in Rome following previous rounds held in Oman and Italy. Omani Foreign Minister Saeed Badr bin Hamad Al Busaidi, whose country has been mediating the process, later clarified that the talks were postponed due to logistical reasons. Despite the delay, Iranian officials reiterated their commitment to reaching a fair and lasting agreement aimed at lifting U.S. sanctions in exchange for strict curbs on Tehran's uranium enrichment. President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, has led negotiations on behalf of the administration, seeking verifiable guarantees that Iran will not develop nuclear weapons. In recent statements, Trump has emphasized a tough stand, warning of potential military consequences if talks fail. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth echoed this position on Wednesday, threatening that Iran would pay the consequences for its support of the Houthi rebels in Yemen. U.S. officials have described recent discussions as positive and productive, with further talks expected to resume soon in Europe. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that negotiations have entered deeper and more detailed discussions, although significant disagreements remain unresolved. Let's take a look.
This is what I can say about Iran, is that the United States was never confirmed to be participating in a fourth round of talks with Iran, which people had believed were Saturday in Rome, despite what there had been some reports. The timing and the venue had yet to be confirmed. I think, again, I would say this is a fluid situation, and I'm obviously saying things to you that are somewhat indistinct, but we expect another round of talks that will take place in the near future. So those details, that's what I have here, that's what I can tell you. And we aren't, though, going, of course, as you might imagine, going to get into the details of any of the negotiations themselves.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio has revealed during a cabinet meeting that the Biden administration State Department maintained dossiers on Americans it labeled vectors of disinformation, including at least one member of the current Trump cabinet. The files were compiled by an office within the department that Rubio said monitored American social media activity for speech deemed misleading. Rubio, who recently announced the closure of the office previously known as the Global Engagement Center, known as GEC, said the entity had overstepped its original mandate. Initially created by President Obama in 2016 to counter foreign propaganda, the GEC expanded under the Biden administration and reportedly engaged with media outlets to flag and suppress certain viewpoints, including pandemic-related speech and criticism of U.S. foreign policy. Vice President J.D. Vance, seated beside Rubio during the meeting, jokingly asked, "Was it me or Elon?" end quote, in reference to Tesla CEO and current Trump administration official Elon Musk, who has previously criticized the GEC. Musk labeled the agency the worst offender in U.S. government censorship in a 2023 social media post and has remained a vocal opponent of government-backed content moderation. Rubio confirmed that the Biden-era office was renamed just before the end of the previous administration and quietly kept operational despite congressional moves to defund it. In announcing the closure, Rubio cited its $50 million annual cost and said it was used to silence Americans instead of foreign adversaries. The department is now undergoing a broader reorganization to focus on diplomatic transparency and constitutional rights. Watch this.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio sharing a surprising revelation during Wednesday's cabinet meeting.
We had an office in the Department of State whose job it was to censor Americans.
Rubio says the Biden administration's State Department kept dossiers on Americans accused of being, quote, vectors of disinformation.
The Department of State of the United States had set up an office to monitor the social media posts and commentary of American citizens.
Adding the documents included a file on an unidentified Trump administration official.
By the way, I'm not going to say who it is. I'll leave it up to them. There's at least one person at this table today who had a dossier in that building.
Madeline Somerville, an attorney and political analyst, says these documents will get turned over to the Americans they belong to, but all we know right now is that their speech was being tracked.
We don't know.
The news will be back after this break.
What a beautiful group of people. There's nowhere I'd rather be than right here in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Titletown, USA. If you're here today and think that you're too young to do something great, let me tell you that you're not too young. You can have great success at a very young age. I've learned that perseverance is everything, so whatever happens, no matter where you are in life, stay optimistic and just keep pushing forward. Just don't stop. Never, ever give up. This is Alabama, and in Alabama, you fight, 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 and you win, win, win. That's what you know how to do. Congratulations to you all. Congratulations to this great class of champions. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you all very much.
Welcome back. Minneapolis police have arrested 34-year-old James Ortley in connection with a mass shooting earlier this week that left 4 people dead and another injured. Officials announced Thursday night. The incident was one of 6 separate shootings within a 24-hour period in the city that claimed 6 lives and injured 5 others. At a press conference, Police Chief Brian O'Hara confirmed Ortley was taken into custody on multiple counts of second-degree murder. Ortley was also wanted on a federal warrant for being a felon in possession of a firearm. One of the injured victims later died at the hospital, bringing the total number of fatalities from this shooting to 4. Authorities believe the shooting was not random and are currently investigating whether others may have been involved. Officials are also examining whether any of the other recent shootings may be connected to Ortley or part of a broader pattern of violence. Records show Ortley was previously arrested in February in connection with a suspected robbery spree in Minneapolis. He was held for 2 days but released without charges at the time. The U.S. Marshal Service assisted in Thursday's arrest, emphasizing the seriousness of the charges now levied against him. Let's take a look.
Bloomington Avenue and East 25th Street. 3 died at the scene, and overnight police said that a 4th victim, a 28-year-old man, had died from his injuries. The 5th victim remains hospitalized. Yesterday afternoon, police say they arrested the suspected gunman in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. 34-year-old James Ortley is now booked into the Hennepin County Jail on suspicion of murder.
While this arrest marks a major breakthrough, our work is far from over. We continue to seek information and assistance from the public regarding this fatal shooting and 2 additional homicides that occurred later on April 30th.
In fact, this week in Minneapolis, a total of 6 people have been killed in 3 deadly shootings. That is twice as many homicides in that 1 week as the previous 3 months combined, and police still working to figure out if any of these shootings are connected. James Ortley, by the way, who has a lengthy criminal history, is currently being held on a $2 million bond. The 34-year-old faces numerous charges, including 5 counts of second-degree murder. He is scheduled to make his first court appearance at 1:30 this afternoon.
President Donald Trump's 2026 budget proposal, released on Friday, in a skinny version by the White House, has called for $163 billion in cuts to non-defense domestic spending, while increasing national security funding. The plan includes reductions in funding for diversity programs, climate initiatives, and federal support for organizations such as PBS and NPR. Treasury and Office of Management and Budget officials said more details, table and tax projections would follow. The administration emphasized the need to rein in a federal budget that has surpassed $7 trillion, with deficits nearing $2 trillion and debt climbing to $36 trillion. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion annually. The Trump administration, with guidance from OMB Director Russell Vought and input from Department of Government Efficiency head Elon Musk, has already moved to shrink the federal workforce and is relying on revenue from newly imposed global tariffs, including a 145% tariff on Chinese goods, to support further priorities. While presidential budgets are not binding, they are significant policy statements. Trump's proposal arrives alongside Republican efforts to push forward a large legislative package of tax cuts, spending reductions, and funding increases for broader enforcement. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he hopes to pass the president's One Big Beautiful Bill, and quote, by Memorial Day, but internal GOP disagreements on tax calculations remain. Democrats have vowed to oppose what they call deep cuts to essential domestic programs. Vought, a key architect of the Conservative Project 2025 blueprint, is also expected to propose a $9 billion recession package targeting U.S. aid and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Trump signed an executive order late Thursday instructing agencies to hold all federal funding to PBS and NPR, a move the administration sees as aligning the budget with conservative priorities and eliminating what they call unnecessary federal spending. Watch this.
President Donald Trump's 2026 budget plan would slash non-defense domestic spending by $163 billion while increasing expenditures on national security. That's according to statements released by the White House on Friday. A budget request is not to be mistaken with the U.S. budget, which is ultimately approved by Congress, but instead serves as a touchstone defining the upcoming fiscal year debates. Trump's budget showed a desire to crack down on diversity programs and initiatives to address climate change, but the administration has yet to release detailed tables on what it wants income taxes, tariffs, or the budget deficit to be. This budget is engineered by Trump Budget Director Russell Vought, a chief architect of Project 2025. The budget carries the added weight of defining Trump's second-term pursuits and comes as Congress is already deep into drafting the Republican president's big bill of tax breaks, spending cuts, and bolstered money for deportations and border security.
Wall Street climbed Friday morning after the U.S. Labor Department reported stronger than expected job growth in April, offering reassurance to investors amid ongoing concerns over tariffs and trade policy. The S&P 500 rose 1.3%, marking what could become a ninth consecutive day of gains, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average increased by 449 points, or 1.1%. The NASDAQ Composite climbed 1.4% as technology stocks led the rally, with Microsoft and Nvidia gaining over 2% each. The U.S. economy added 177,000 jobs in April, a slowdown from March, but still ahead of forecasts. Analysts, however, caution that the latest numbers do not account for the full economic impact of President Trump's sweeping global tariffs. Although most of the newly announced tariffs have been delayed for 90 days, those targeting Chinese imports set at 145% remain in place. Apple, for instance, dropped 3.3% after estimating the tariffs will cost the company $900 million this year. Financial stocks also moved higher, with JP Morgan Chase and Visa both posting gains. Meanwhile, market strategist Chris Zachary warned that if the White House resumes its initial tariff strategy in July, investors should brace for volatility similar to what occurred during the early April sell-off when the S&P 500 lost more than 9%. Despite Friday's rally, economic fundamentals are showing signs of strain. The U.S. economy contracted by 0.3% in the first quarter, partly due to companies accelerating imports ahead of new tariffs. With uncertainty around trade policy and inflation impacting corporate guidance, many firms have withdrawn financial forecasts. Investors are watching closely to see whether Trump rolls back tariffs after negotiations, particularly with China, continue in the weeks ahead. Watch this.
Tonight, Wall Street surging. The Dow up 564 points. The Nasdaq and S&P 500 each recovering all of their losses since President Trump announced steep tariffs on imports on April 2nd. It follows a strong jobs report. The economy adding 177,000 jobs in April. The unemployment rate holding steady. The first report fully factoring in President Trump's tariffs. All of it as recent polls show many Americans disapprove of his handling of the economy. The president tonight in an exclusive interview with NBC's Kristen Welker.
Some people on Wall Street have expressed concerns that the possibility of a recession is increasing. And I want to know what you think about that. Are you comfortable with the country potentially dipping into a recession for a period of time if you are able to achieve your long-term goals?
Well, you know, you say some people on Wall Street say, well, I tell you something else. Some people on Wall Street say that we're going to have the greatest economy in history. Why don't you talk about them? Because some people on Wall Street say this is the greatest thing.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at, though. It's the same question.
Yeah, there are many people on Wall Street say this is going to be the greatest windfall ever happened.
And that's my question.
Remember
the long term. Yeah. Is it okay in the short term to have a recession?
This. Look, yeah, everything's okay. What we are, I said, this is a transition period. I think we're going to do fantastically.
Meanwhile,
the news continues after this break. Stay with us.
The world is watching. Billions of hearts, billions of souls, each one a life that matters. And every day they're being touched by the power of the gospel because you gave our dearest partners. Through the Loveworld networks, the message of our Lord Jesus is reaching further than ever before, into nations where churches are silenced, into homes where hope had disappeared, into hearts where light had never shone, into every man's world. This is the year of completeness, and truly, we are everywhere. You, our highly esteemed partners, have taken your place in this divine mission, the mandate to complete the full preaching of the gospel in all nations of the world. Through your giving, our language-specific stations are now heard in corners of the earth where no preacher has ever stepped. You sponsored airtime that transformed lives, sending light into the darkest corners. You brought the Loveworld networks into homes, schools, offices, by tagging your names to our ministry programs, sponsoring our studio upgrade around the world, and ensuring Pastor Chris in 1 billion homes is a reality. In 2025, we are taking bold steps to complete the full preaching of the gospel in our time through our Pastor Chris in 1 billion homes project. Together, we are fulfilling Matthew 24:14, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. We are marching forward, flooding the nations with the truth of God's word. Pastor Chris in 1 billion homes. No barrier is too high, no nation is too far, no home is unreachable, and the time is now. We call on our army of passionate partners across the globe. Be a part of Pastor Chris in 1 billion homes project today. Stand with the man of God. Stand with the Loveworld networks. Partner without limits. Let your giving echo into eternity. And together, let's flood the earth with the message of our Lord Jesus. For more information, please call the number showing on your screen. God bless you.
Welcome back. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has warned it may shut down its services in Nigeria following a series of regulatory actions and fines totaling over $290 million imposed by 3 Nigerian government agencies. The U.S.-based tech giant described the demands as unrealistic and said it is facing enforcement measures that could force it to pull its social media platforms from one of Africa's most digitally engaged markets. The dispute stems from the fines issued by Nigeria's Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, known as the FCCPC, the National Data Protection Commission, known as the NDPC, and the advertising regulator, in mid-2023. The FCCPC fined Meta $220 million over alleged anti-competitiveness practices. The advertising authority levied a $37 million fine over unauthorized ads, and the NDPC imposed a $32.8 million penalty for violations of the country's data privacy laws. A federal high court in Abuja has ordered Meta to pay the fines by the end of June after the company's legal challenge was rejected. Meta, which also owns WhatsApp, did not indicate whether the messaging service would be affected. In its court filings, the company singled out the data privacy regulatory for its strict conditions, including requiring Meta to seek a prior approval before transferring Nigerian user data abroad and mandating the creation of government-approved educational content on data privacy. Meta called these demands unfeasible and accused the agency of misinterpreting Nigeria's data protection laws or misinterpreting. Facebook is the mostly widely used social media platform in Nigeria, with tens of thousands or tens of millions relying on it for communication, news, and business. The prospect of Meta suspending services raised serious concerns for the country's digital economy, particularly for small online businesses that depend on these platforms for sales and outreach. The Nigerian government has yet to comment on whether it will reconsider its position. A South African woman, Kelly Smith, has been convicted of kidnapping and trafficking her 6-year-old daughter, Jocelyn Smith, who disappeared more than a year ago and remains missing. The verdict, delivered on Friday, also found her boyfriend, Jacqueline Appelis, and their friend, Stevino Van Ryn, guilty of the same charges. The case has captured national attention and sparked widespread concern over child safety in vulnerable communities. Jocelyn vanished in February 2023 from outside her home in Saldanha Bay near Cape Town. Despite an extensive and highly publicized search, the child has yet to be found. During the trial, prosecutors accused Smith of selling or delivering her daughter to unknown individuals and then lying about the circumstances of her disappearance. The court was told that Smith discussed selling her children for as little as $275, and one witness claimed Jocelyn was trafficked to a traditional healer. The trial, which took place in the Saldanha Multipurpose Center to accommodate public interest, featured testimony from a neighbor who alleged Smith admitted to doing something silly by selling her daughter. Another witness, Jocelyn's teacher, recalled Smith saying her daughter was already on a ship headed for West Africa. Smith and the Co-defendants did not testify or call any witnesses to their defense. All three convicted individuals now face the possibility of life in prison. A sentencing date has not yet been set. Meanwhile, police have pledged to continue the search for Jocelyn. The case has reignited discussions about child protection, poverty, and criminal exploitation in South Africa's underserved communities. Just before we end the news, a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. China signals willingness to negotiate tariffs with U.S., warns against coercion. U.S. denies reports of Iran nuclear talks in Rome, but says future negotiations are likely. Rubio revealed Biden-era State Department office kept disinformation files on Trump officials. Minneapolis police arrest suspect in mass shooting that left 4 dead. President Trump's 2026 budget proposal slashes domestic spending, ramps up national security and tariffs. And that's the news for today. Join us at the same time tomorrow for more news. I'm Barbara Sam. Good night and God bless you.